The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Just what really happened to Lori Vallow's kids? James Buckland and I, we're going to discuss that on tonight's Charlie Crime Talk. It is what some people call the fastest minutes in podcasting, and we are delighted to have you with us. James, how about telling folks how they can find us out there on the old super web?
All right, I will, Charlie, and thank you. Here at Charlie Crimebuster, we welcome people when they make suggestions or when they make comments or even form an opinion, whether they agree with us or not. We still like to hear what they have to say, and they can reach us with a shout out, and they can email charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, or they can text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. And if they reach out with a shout out or a text to Charlie, we will give them some behind the scenes updates and even some more stuff too. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Also, this podcast is being sponsored by Peacemaker Network, and we want to say thank you to all of those who support our podcast and the men and women, first responders, law enforcement, and the military by being badge members, BADGE, by subscribing to peacemakernetwork.com. And if you would like to become a member, simply go to peacemakernetwork.com. That's peacemakernetwork.com. But if you're a true crime junkie, we call them binge-casties here, you can simply listen to many of our archive podcasts on our website, charliecrimebuster.com. That's charliecrimebuster.com. Also, our podcasts are on many popular podcast platforms. Just simply search for Charlie Crimebuster, or you can ask your smart speaker to play Charlie Crimebuster. But since you're here on YouTube tonight, we would like for you to click that subscribe button and the notification bell, and you'll be notified the next time we drop one of our episodes. And thank you for subscribing.
You know, James, I was just looking here. I just read something that just really goes along with what you said about the Peacemaker Network program that we have, and helping the folks in the military and the folks that are first responders and law enforcement.
Right.
It was about it was about one of our Navy SEALs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll try to get the information together, probably mention it on one of our podcasts. But what was really so extraordinary about it was that he had walked into a mess in Iraq and was machine gunned and shot 7 times in the face. And just really, it's a miracle that he was alive and that he survived.
Wow.
But what was even beyond that, and I had heard this before, but I just read it today. He placed a note outside his hospital room, and it said this: if you are coming in here to show sympathy or to feel sorry for me, do not come in this room. I love my country. I love protecting my country. I love doing what I was doing. So I'm not feeling sorry for myself at all, and I don't need anybody in this room that feels that same way.
Wow.
Isn't that extraordinary?
That is extraordinary. That is indeed extraordinary.
His face was just like, it was just like a hamburger, that's how bad it was.
Wow.
And they've done, some constructive surgery since then, and I saw him, but you can still see scars and this sort of thing, with it. But the fact that he just failed to feel sorry for himself and felt what he was doing was right for the country, and that nobody else should feel, show sympathy for him. I thought that's the kind of brave men and women we have in the military.
That's right.
They're out there fighting for our freedom.
That's
and
absolutely
the same thing with the cops that are out there. 50 some odd officers have been shot already, this year. And they put that badge on every day and walk out there and don't know for sure they'll be coming home that day.
That's right.
And these are brave people. So I'm glad that at Charlie Crimebuster that we have that kind of a sponsor. And I do encourage the folks to go to Peacemaker Network and check that out.
That's right. Yeah. And it's nice to know that peacemakers, all of our peacemakers, we're talking about first responders too,
Hmm.
and men and women in the military, and our law enforcement officers and personnel. We appreciate everything that they do to keep us safe.
Yeah, and
Everything.
I think it's great. I think we're a real good match with Peacemaker and Charlie Crime Buster because I think that the majority of people that are crime buffs, the majority, maybe not all of them,
Hmm.
but the majority of crime junkies out there, they really stand for law and order, and they stand against the kind of crime that we
Hmm.
report on,
That's right.
and
They
uh,
do.
and so if they do, they surely should stand with the peacemakers who are out there trying to uh, to combat this terrible crime that we have in the country. And today we're going to get into, you and I just got through, for the folks that are listening, James and I just got through watching a big rocket take off from down here in Florida
That's right.
all the way to outer space. And,
That's right.
we take that for granted that we live right here where we can see those rockets leave here and go straight to outer space.
That's right. That's right.
And boy, you talk about a rocket of a case. This Lori Vallow case, that was one that really exploded, right?
Oh my word. I mean, I listened to the interview that Keith Morrison had with her.
Hmm.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
Yeah, it's incredible. It was just incredible.
Yeah,
And that's what we're going to be talking about on today's
that's right.
program. Yep.
That's right. So, but well, bringing that up, why does Lori just so you know, why does Lori say that they have her and Chad will be exonerated? Where did she get that idea from in the first place? Are
Well,
you kidding me?
yeah, I know. And talk about unbelievable, right?
Yeah,
And unthinkable,
Unthinkable
unthinkable,
series. Yep.
and unbelievable.
Yeah.
That she has that belief even to this day. And she said not only she would be exonerated, but Chad, her husband, would be exonerated. And in fact, she said, well, here's what she said. She said Jesus showed her the future, and they were
Right.
exonerated.
Yep.
Then turned around and said, jokingly, and I don't know how you could joke talking about this kind of stuff, but she said, after I get exonerated, maybe I'll go on Dancing with the Stars and you can come. You remember that?
I
She
do.
told
I
Keith
do.
Morrison, you can come on over. I'm going to be on Dancing with the Stars. So that shows that this lady is way out there
Oh,
in outer
totally
space.
delusional. Totally
And the
delusional.
question is, do you think she believes that?
Yeah, I do actually. When you watch her body language,
Yeah,
she really
yeah.
believes that she's going to be exonerated. She honestly believes that.
Yeah, well, I think psychiatrists and psychologists who probably have already examined her think that she's it's what we call delusional. She's that way. Yeah, no doubt
Well,
about it.
well, I mean, to be exonerated is one thing, but what was their motive for killing four people and the kids?
Well, I think the district attorney said it best. One of the district attorneys, Rob Wood, who was prosecuting for Madison County, and he said there is all that religious connections there, and certainly there are with that cult that she became a part of. But he said, really, when it boils down to it, it's three things. It was sex, money, and power. And
Yeah,
I think when you really boil it down, when you really get down to it, Chad was, she manipulated Chad by sex.
right.
That's how he was manipulated. He manipulated her by power, getting her into
Hmm.
these delusions that he and her were going to be, the saviors of the world right alongside of Jesus Christ, and
Hmm.
they were going to be doing this and rule over the people, and they had met in other lives and this sort of thing, and so he would manipulate her that way, and she would manipulate him through sex, and here, the guy is. Not a tremendously successful author. If you want to be looked down at it, didn't
Hmm.
make millions of dollars with his books, but he
No.
did have a following, a small following of people that were kind of offspring from the Latter Day Saints.
Hmm.
But he wasn't Clark. Well, I tell my age if I say Clark Gable. I don't even know who Clark Gable is, but he wasn't the most handsome Hollywood man in the world, and here he had attracted this this somewhat attractive lady who was at one time a beauty queen,
That's right. That's right.
you know,
Yeah.
and so that's where he was manipulated, and then he manipulated her the other way, and so that motive. But when it boiled down to it, it was sex and money. Now the money tied into this thing. They thought she was going to get the $1 million from Charles Vallow's
Yep.
insurance.
That's right.
They ended up getting like 300 to 400, 500,000 from
Right.
Tammy's insurance. So
Yeah.
they had to have money in order to finance their affair and this delusional thoughts that they had about their kingdom. So the way they got the money was through killing people off and getting the life insurance. Even the attempted murder of Bordeaux, Brandon Bordeaux, the
Right.
attempted murder of his, there was an insurance policy connected to that as well. So in
Wow.
all of those areas, there was connected to it large payouts. So that's where you get the money: sex, money, and power. Power being that they were really manipulating a lot of people that are involved. Probably the person that was manipulated the most was her hitman. You
Oh
know,
yeah. Yeah.
it,
Oh
it
yeah.
was the Alex Cox.
Alex Cox. Mhm.
Yeah, Alex Cox was manipulated. He thought that in his own crazy mind, delusional mind that they brought him in, that he was doing God's work in removing these obstacles,
Right.
these people that were supposed to be zombies who had gone in the dark. Who declared that? Wasn't God, it wasn't in the scripture, it was Chad who said it.
You're right.
And so these guys went dark, and then so he thought that he was doing what he was supposed to do. So just a terrible, terrible, crazy, crazy case this is.
Well, speaking of crazy, before we get too much into the rest of the unthinkable, tell us about the crazy crook for this week.
Well, we don't say it enough that we always put that digital footprint out there, right? You and I
That's
talk
true.
about that every week.
Every week.
But I got to tell you, James, this footprint was big enough to be Bigfoot's footprint. This is a lady on TikTok who had 350,000 followers.
Wow.
That's
Quite the
not,
influencer.
That's not something small,
No.
That you have to say something to get 350,000 followers.
Mm-hmm.
But she was doing that thing that a lot of people have been caught at. She was doing it not in Walmart. I hear about it mostly in Walmart, but in Target, they have the self-checkout places where you can go and check yourself out and
Right.
take the barcode and run it and run your bill up and all that sort of thing and pay it.
Mm-hmm.
But what she did, she would go around and she would find these real good things, these good buys, and instead of running the code for that particular product, she had another code that was cheaper and she was running that. And I think they said it was about $500 worth of merchandise that she stole that way.
Wow.
And the police then turned around and they realized what had happened after it was reported. And they did get her on camera while she was doing this. And in her clothes, they had her there when they had the description of the clothes. So they took a picture and they put it out. We're looking for this person. Well, guess what? If you have 350,000 followers on TikTok, somebody might recognize you, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
And
I would think
somebody
so.
did. Somebody did, and they called it in, and they went back and looked at her TikTok videos, and it actually showed her picking up these products. It showed her going to her car and putting those products in the car in the same clothes that she was doing her TikTok that she was videoing. Now, she didn't say in the video that she was stealing that, but she did put herself on, on the video on there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the police officer was right. He said this was a lady that incriminated her own self in front of 350,000 followers.
Oh my
So
word.
that's pretty crazy, don't you think?
That is crazy. That is crazy. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, so that entitled her to be Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week.
Wow. So back to Lori Vallow Daybell, which she had that discussion with Keith about what name she should be called.
Yeah.
Remind us as to why it's so important to go over the timelines in crimes.
Well, as we do that just about in every one of our cases, I guess it's probably the old cop in me,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the way we usually, solve crimes. And you see this all the time in crime dramas on TV. You'll see them bring that board out and the pictures out and all that. So what they are, they're basically running a timeline. And I think it's especially important in this case because when the country was first alerted to Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, the first thing that the country really heard was that there were two children that were missing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's when we came into the picture with this entire case, and why we got on real time when they were looking for the kids, and people were wondering where are they? Were they put in some monastery somewhere, or were they staying at a friend's house, or did they take them to I guess some dungeon somewhere, or bunker somewhere? Where were these kids at?
Mm-hmm.
But what the public did not understand, James, at that time, nor did we really understand it at that time, that by that time there had already been four people murdered.
Wow.
And so the country wasn't thinking about four people being murdered. The country was thinking, hey, we got to find these kids.
Yeah.
We didn't know where the kids were, but we also didn't know by that time there had been four people murdered. Four, you know, which is
Unbelievable.
pretty astonishing,
Yeah.
Now,
Oh, yeah.
now, even then when these things started coming out, it wasn't quite clear that four people had been murdered because remember Charles Vallow, Lori's brother,
Mm-hmm.
Cox shot and killed him, but he said it was self-defense. He said that he had gotten hit over the head with a baseball bat, which the police had really been thinking. It's hard for me to realize that they got duped that way because if Charles Vallow had hit this guy in the head with a baseball bat, it wouldn't be just a little scratch; it was on his head. But
Exactly.
but but that's what he said, and so that went down for months and months and months as self-defense. We didn't know it was murder. And then when Tammy died, what did the autopsy say at the very beginning? No, they didn't do an autopsy, but what was the death ruled? It was ruled what? A natural death. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that's what
Mm-hmm.
everybody said, that she died naturally.
Right.
So all during this time, uh, we were looking for those kids and all the emphasis on the kids, but little did most of the country know at that time that they had already killed Charles Vallow and they'd already murdered Tammy. And then the kids were murdered, so that made four people. And that's why that timeline is so important. Because when you go back to the timeline, you'll find that before the first murder was Charles Vallow,
Mm-hmm.
The
Right.
second murder was Tylee. The third murder was JJ, and the fourth murder was Tammy. You know,
Right.
and
Right.
so you gotta get that in the timeline to really realize and go back and trace and see what really happened to this. I call it, I think, in my own mind, I call it 90 days of murder. And that's
Mm-hmm.
basically what it was.
Yeah. 90 days. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting. You should point out the fact that we were talking about her children. This goes all the way back to February 24th of 2020. That's when you
Yeah.
first released Where Are Her
Right.
Children? That was our podcast, February 24th, 2020. So it's been
Yeah. And
5 years.
yeah.
5 years.
And when you go back to that February day, remember 90 days back from that
Hmm.
is when all this started. So,
Exactly.
so really, although it looks like because it's had so much attention and gone through two trials already, you would think this thing has been over 2 or 3 years, but all of this took place in 90 days.
That's right. We have 12 podcasts that have to do with Lori.
12, yeah, yeah,
12 podcasts. So if you
yeah,
want to listen to the podcasts, go to charliecrimebuster.com and you can find those podcasts there.
yep. Find them all right there.
That's right. So how did Lori and Chad meet? I know we covered that in one of our podcasts, but let's
Yeah,
remind our listeners.
yeah, I think it would be good to do that. This, it's amazing, isn't it, that just one little day in your life can change dramatically so many people's lives, can it?
Hmm. Oh yeah. Oh
Because
yeah.
there was a day when Lori had been reading some of Chad Daybell's writing, some of his books, and he was coming to speak at a conference, and one of their friends invited her to go to that conference. And that day is when Lori and Chad met. Just met at that one day.
Hmm.
And think about how that one, we meet people all the time, don't we, in
Yeah.
life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But think about just that one time when two people met. Think how that impacted so many lives,
Oh, yeah.
and really
Yeah.
impacted it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you think of all the relatives of little Tylee and JJ. I think of her grown son. Who was in the interview that was on Dateline there.
Hmm.
We think of him, how Colby, how
Hmm.
he loved his sister and his little brother.
Yeah. Oh,
Think
yeah.
about little JJ's grandparents. Who
Yeah.
and by the way, that's how this whole thing started,
Exactly.
because they contacted the police and said, we haven't heard from JJ.
That's right. That's right.
They were impacted about it. Think about Chad Daybell's kids.
Hmm.
I feel sorry for those kids.
Yeah, I do too. It's
I
really
mean,
sad.
they had a very stable life. Their life was going good for them,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then he gets led astray and follows lust, and look how it impacted his family.
Yeah.
Took their mother away from them,
And
took their
eventually they're
father.
dead. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all but that one chance meeting. So I think
Wow.
that's something to really think about.
Well, one of the things that in the interview with Keith Merritt Morrison, they actually showed the numerous times that Charles Vallow had contact with the police. So why didn't the police listen to Charles Vallow when he told them that he and his children were in danger?
Well, I wish they had, don't you?
Yeah. He'd still be with
But
us.
let's put ourselves in the feet, the boots of the police, I guess. Um, I can really pretty well say it in 3 words: Queen of manipulation.
Wow.
And that's what Lori Vallow was. I mean, she,
Well stated. Yeah, well
she
stated.
really knew how to manipulate people, and she knew when she was interviewed by the police, she turned that totally around,
She did.
and said that he was cheating on her,
Hmm.
which wasn't true. She
Nope.
was cheating on him, and that sometimes she was just trying to get away from him, and he was trying to do this and do that. And then the other thing, you realize that just because I go to a police officer and say something doesn't mean that it's so, you know.
That's true.
And
That's true.
you have to have some evidence, if and I went many times as a police officer. I've responded to domestics, and you go into a domestic, and you think that this person is abusing this person, but you don't have any proof that they're abusing that person. So I can't really arrest somebody
Hmm.
unless I have some proof. Now, it used to be a lot harder because used to you would have to have one of the other spouses would have to agree to press charges on that person,
Right.
or you could not make an arrest.
That's right.
So, and oftentimes you get called there and they won't, they will not, they do not want to prosecute. But now it got a little easier, because now, as a police officer, if you go in and you see a visible mark and you have reason to believe that that visible mark was caused by the other one, you can arrest them whether the person wants to press charges or not.
Right.
But in this case, there were no marks.
Hmm.
There wasn't any physical abuse whatsoever. And it was just he said, she said. Now what would have been better to happen is if Charles, when he started that divorce proceeding, if he had got him a good attorney and got those kids, try to get custody of them, that would have worked out a lot better. But the police, they really didn't have any real evidence to go on. But you would hope that they would have maybe given a little more credence to what Charles Vallow was saying.
I agree. I agree. Well,
Then
tell
they,
us.
they then they could have given him resources that he could go to get help in that situation.
That's true.
But
That's
they
true.
basically just dismissed it as, a squabble between people.
Hmm.
That may remind you of something else that we just covered. Remember Gabby
Yep.
Pito?
Yep.
You know,
Yep. Exactly. Yep.
same kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. Well, tell us about Lori's surprise.
I love this probably more than anything that we cover in this whole case. I love the fact that when Charles Vallow was killed, Lori thought that she was going to get that $1 million life insurance policy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And little did she know that prior to Charles being killed, when he realized everything was going crazy, he did, thank God, take the time to change the beneficiary to his sister
Yep.
rather than her. And so she calls up, and I don't know whether you heard the call or not, but when she called the insurance company,
Mm-hmm.
that is just one, that is, and I would encourage our audience, if you want to hear something that would just really made me feel good, it
Mm-hmm.
was when she called the insurance company and they said, "Well, do you know who the beneficiary is?" She said, "Yes, I'm the beneficiary." But guess
Mm-hmm.
what? Surprise, surprise, surprise. She was not the beneficiary.
This is true.
you
This is
know,
true.
and they thought, they were going to take that $1 million and it just didn't happen to him, It just did not happen to
Yeah, yeah. It's so so true. Well, back to our 90 days of murder. Can you kind of elaborate on that again? I know we covered it,
Yeah,
superficially, but
we did cover it, but I guess this gives us a good opportunity to get to really heart of our podcast this last week. What I was waiting for in that interview, and you watched the interview too, but what I was waiting for in that interview, James, was I wanted to know what happened to those kids. How were those kids killed?
hmm
That's
hmm
what I was waiting for. And you saw her. She dodged him like she was the queen of dodgeball. He would ask questions and she would go off on a tangent. And
Yep.
and she would do this and do that and do that and do that. And he kept trying to get her down to it. But interesting enough, we do not hear Lori Vallow tell Keith Morrison what happened to the kids. The only
That,
thing we hear her say to Keith Morrison was, "I wasn't there."
yep. That's right.
But she did in a podcast with Colby. Colby had his own, he does have his own podcast.
Right.
And in that podcast, she did say what she felt happened to the kids. And what she said happened was that Tylee, who was 16 years of age, that she was being frustrated, having problems, this sort of thing. And little JJ got on her nerves, and she reached out and got angry and either pushed him or and he hit his head or something like that, and she ended up killing him. And then out of remorse and because she was so brokenhearted, then that Tylee took her own life. So what Lori said happened was that the kids were not murdered, but that Tylee killed her little brother by accident, and then out of remorse, that Tylee killed her own self.
So
That's what Lori said happened to her kids.
why didn't she report
Yeah, well, why didn't she report it, right? Yeah,
it? If that's actually the case, why didn't she report it?
yeah,
Why'd you dismember them and put them in the backyard?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I listened to Colby's podcast as well, and it's disturbing to hear her say those very things, which we
yeah,
all know is not true because,
yeah.
as you
We
said, the
know.
timeline doesn't match.
Well, yeah, the reason why we know that that didn't happen was, first of all, she constantly lies. I
Yep.
mean, even though she may have believed that she was a spiritual leader or anything, then maybe she thinks that because she's a spiritual leader, she can die, but a lie. But in all of those, all those tapes that we heard in the trials, she was lying to people every time you turn around. She told the police that what the children were with a friend. She
hmm
told the police this. She told the police that. She told people that would call and ask her. She would say the kids are fine, blah blah blah. She was constantly lying all the time. So it should not be a shock to Keith Morrison or to the world or to me that she would lie about that, right?
Exactly.
But the biggest reason we know that she lied is the evidence just does not back that up.
You're
The
right.
evidence tells us that Tylee was the first one that was killed of the kids.
Right.
First of all, there was Charles, Then, of course, Brandon was shot at, but then Tylee was the one that was killed. She was last seen in a picture when they went to Yellowstone.
Mm-hmm.
That night, after that day with that picture, she was never, ever seen again. And they can now follow her spiritual hitman, Alex Cox.
Right.
They can follow him the very next day to the very grave site by his cell phone, the very grave site where Tylee was burned in that pit,
Right.
and then they buried her after she was, her bones in that pit. So we know that she died first. So if she died first, she could not have killed herself after killing Tylee, right?
That's right.
So then 14 days later, that's when Tylee is seen at the last time. That's when he is there in the home and she has friends over. They see Tylee over Alex Cox's shoulder. They see him take him up to his room, and that's the last time he's ever seen. But then again, through following this cell phone, the very next day, they see him too there at the gravesite of where they found little JJ.
Right.
So we know that's the way they died. I mean, we don't know. We really don't know how they killed them, but we know that they were buried
Mm-hmm.
the very next day,
Mm-hmm.
and we know that goodness gracious, and you just said it a moment ago. I mean, this is what really I I don't have any sympathy for the fact that she was manipulated by Chad or he was manipulated by her. Either way, because anybody that would take their own child and take their own body and dismember it and burn it.
Mm-hmm.
That is just incredible to me.
Yeah, it's disturbing.
Yeah, and it's unthinkable, as we say this series is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what they did to Tylee. They literally dismembered her and burned her, like
Mm-hmm.
an animal, even worse than an animal,
Right. Right.
and we know. I mean, I'm confident that certainly Chad knew what was going on because he was there that day and made up an
Mm-hmm.
excuse about everything, about the shooting at the raccoon or whatever it was and burying the raccoon and all that.
Right.
And he had a fire in the fire pit and all that. So we know he was tied to it. Now, whether Lori was there during all that time or not, she certainly knew what had happened. And she certainly knew those kids were buried there. And I'll tell you why we know that, James. We know that she knew the kids were buried there because some people say, well, she just didn't know. Maybe Chad and and her brother Larry, maybe 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 they did this and she didn't know about what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
She knew what was happening because the day that the police came and found the bodies, there was a phone call between Lori and Chad.
Right.
And when you hear that phone call, and when you see his voice drop, and she says, "What's wrong?" And he says, "They're on the property
Mm-hmm.
and they're out there digging." You could see her voice drop too.
Yep.
And you could see she too was, she knew then that it was over.
Yeah.
And that tell,
If
yeah,
she'd have come
that
back and said, why are they on your property? What are they doing?
Yeah, or why are you worried? They're not going to find anything there. She didn't
Exactly.
say that, did she?
She did not.
No, because she knew those kids were right there on that property.
Absolutely.
So, in my opinion, both of these people are guilty of murder, or conspiracy to murder, and frankly, I believe both of them deserve the death penalty.
Yeah. Well, so you pretty much covered, what happened to the kids. I mean, and you really believe that they were killed? Well, let's just discuss it. How do you believe
Okay.
they were killed? Yeah. How do you think they died?
Well, I think they probably used chloroform or something like that,
Hmm.
and put them to death. And then, I don't think that there was any violence, as far as strangling them or anything like that. Although, I guess we gotta back up there because we do know that Tammy was strangled,
True.
the evidence says that she was. But again, she was an adult, and she probably fought back, you know.
Oh, well, there was a
Uh,
plastic bag over JJ's head.
yeah,
So
yeah,
he obviously
yeah,
died from asphyxiation, obviously.
yeah.
But
Yeah, but I have an idea. You remember, and I think we can probably go back to to think about, America's Worst Mom. Remember, here in
Oh yeah.
Orlando,
Yep.
it's pretty well, she used probably chloroform,
Hmm.
and I hope, let me put it this way. I hope that those children were put to sleep and then smothered after they were put to sleep.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I hope it didn't happen any other way,
I hope they didn't suffer. Yeah.
Yeah, I do
Yeah.
too. I would hate to think that they suffered during that time.
Well,
But
do you believe Lori when she says what happened to the kids when she told Colby that on his podcast? Do you really
no,
believe her?
no, I don't believe it. And for what we said, the evidence says that there's no way that could have happened that way because they didn't die that way.
Yeah, there's
You
no
know,
timeline to match it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's just a way to make her feel a little better in her mind and try to help people think better of her. That because she never admits that she had anything to do with these killing of the kids.
She
And we know
challenged.
and we know we did. Yeah,
She always challenged Keith Morrison. Saying, where's the proof? Do you
yeah.
have the proof? You know.
Well, I would say the if I had been Keith, I would probably said, the proof is sitting right here before me because
Yeah.
you're in an orange jumpsuit,
Yeah.
and you're going right back behind bars, and they don't put people in orange jumpsuits and in bars unless they have proof,
That's right.
So
That's right.
there's the proof. You are the proof, Lori. You're sitting here. You're sitting here convicted of murder, right?
He even commented the fact that she's a great storyteller. She can
Yeah.
she can gab.
Oh
That's
yeah. Yeah.
no problem there.
Yeah, I mean, when and the thing that really is amazing to me, when you look back at this story, and we've covered it from every angle at all, but the day that Charles Vallow was killed, and she comes back after shopping, right, going to pick up flip-flops and going to the,
Burger King.
get Burger King and all
Yep.
that.
Hmm.
She just leans up against that car as nothing had happened, anything in the world, and said, "Oh, the neighbors see the police. Oh, sorry, neighbors," and laughed,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, as we reported in the podcast, that very day that her estranged husband was gunned down in her own home,
Right.
they had a pool party.
Yeah.
A pool
Yeah.
party.
Yeah. Party.
So,
Yeah.
so this lady has to be either mentally unbalanced or a psychopath because she had no guilt whatsoever, no remorse whatsoever. She's not shown remorse. I don't think I've seen a tear. I don't think she's
No.
ever shed a tear that I've ever seen.
Not that I've
Maybe
seen
she
either.
did in court, but I just don't think so.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. No.
Yeah.
She's definitely the charmer. No doubt about
Yeah.
that.
What a sad story
It
when
is
you
a
really
sad
think
story.
about it.
It
Yeah.
really is sad. Truly sad. So what's on our plate for this weekend?
Well, there's been big news again. We were following the brothers that killed their parents. There's big news this week, and we're not going to tell people what it is right now. They got to listen next week to see what it is. But there's big news about that case, and we're going to pick that up and call it part 2 of the Unthinkable program there, and we're going to let the folks know what the big news is about that.
Yeah, Menendez brothers.
Menendez brothers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got several podcasts on that as well.
Yep.
We had one that we did in October and then one in November. So if they want to go to charliecrimebuster.com, they can
You get caught up on
Get
it
caught up.
because there's new news about it, and we're going
That's
to talk
right.
about that on this coming week's podcast, and we'll talk about another sad story, of
Yeah. Yeah.
crime,
It's true.
So until next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep, for the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @charliecrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/charliecrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.